While we were fleeing, my closest friend shoved me straight into the traffickers' grasp. I suffered severe beatings and was then traded to a rural village as a bride for an utterly destitute man. 5 years on, I was the object of widespread envy, married to a billionaire, while my husband ascended to become the most sought-after young scion in Beijing's high society. Upon my rebirth, my best friend held fast to the trafficker, desperately urging me to escape. I couldn't help but smile. I looked at the trafficker's arms, thicker than my own legs, and took off running. In my past life, I was caught by the trafficker and beaten until I was covered in bruises. Even then, I clung desperately to the trafficker's leg, refusing to let him go, just to buy my best friend, Zhong Mengmeng, some time to escape. She pushed me into the trafficker's arms, but I don't blame her. I knew it was a survival instinct. I just held a faint hope in my heart that she would bring someone to rescue me. Time and again, I fought off the traffickers, only to be beaten until I was covered in bruises, a fate worse than death. My body was covered in bruises. There wasn't a single spot left unscathed. I finally managed to escape to town. As soon as I got a signal, I called my best friend right away, begging her to come save me. But what I heard was Zhong Mengmeng lying in my fiancé's arms, feigning distress with a coy laugh. Oh my, those human traffickers are so terrifying. What could a weak woman like me possibly do? My fiancé, Qi Lian, asked in a hoarse, impatient voice. Who's being so annoying, calling at a time like this? A series of soft moans came from the other end of the line, as if an adult film were playing out right there over the phone. My mind went blank. I hurriedly hung up, intending to call the police. Before I could even dial the number, I was captured by the human traffickers. That time, I lost a leg and nearly lost my life. Behind me, I heard Zhong Mengmeng imitating my past self, shouting with righteous indignation. Ran, run. I'll hold them off. Behind me, I heard the sounds of the traffickers punching and kicking, mixed with Zhong Mengmeng's screams. Without a moment's hesitation, I took off running. I'd already seen just how vicious these human traffickers were. Only a fool wouldn't run. As my best friend's screams echoed behind me, I ran faster and faster, as if I'd grown wings. Finally, I didn't have to repeat the mistakes of my past life. Relying on my own 2 feet, I ran out with my head held high. I ran into the high-speed rail station. Ignoring the strange looks from the crowd, I sat down on the ground and burst into tears. I pulled out my phone and frantically bought a ticket for the next available train. The moment I stepped through my front door, I truly realized I had been reborn. I took a hot shower, ordered some takeout, and slept soundly. I woke up to the sound of someone pounding on the door. The flimsy door was being pounded so hard it shook the house. Zhong Mengmeng's mother's curses echoed from outside the door. Zhong Ran, get out here. Where's my daughter? I yawned and slowly opened the door. Zhong Mengmeng's mother frowned at my sluggish appearance and shoved me aside. She barged into my house without hesitation and, without my permission, opened the doors to every room to look around. Mengmeng, where's my Mengmeng? In my previous life, when Zhong Mengmeng returned home alone, my parents had gone to her to ask about my whereabouts. Back then, not only did Zhong Mengmeng fail to reveal that I had been abducted, but she also feared that I would expose her misdeeds upon my return, so she lied to cover for the human traffickers. She was wearing a pristine white dress, her face streaked with tears. I was tired from playing and wanted to come home, but Zhong Ran insisted she had to meet an online friend. No matter what I said, she refused to leave with me. I don't know where she went. I don't know, I really don't know. My parents didn't believe I would go meet an online friend behind my fiancé's back. They knelt on the ground, begging Zhong Mengmeng to reveal my whereabouts. Zhong Mengmeng's mother grabbed my parents by their clothes and shooed them out. As she shooed them out, she shouted, "You raised such a shameless daughter, and you still have the nerve to show your faces in public. If I were you, I'd find a rope and hang myself." As she spoke, she took out her phone and posted a photo of my parents online. "Everyone, take a look, her own daughter cheated and ran off with some stranger, yet she blames it all on our family. How can there be such shameless people in this world?" My parents were trending on social media, bombarded with abuse from netizens. My scandalous stories spread like wildfire, and some netizens even used AI technology to create numerous explicit photos and videos of me. Not only did they portray me as a shameless slut, but many people also used red paint to scrawl the word slut on my front door and plastered my explicit photos all over the stairwell. My parents not only lost their jobs but were also looked down upon by everyone. In the end, unable to bear the humiliation, they jumped from a high-rise building. I blinked and smiled at Zhong Mengmeng's mother. Meng Meng went to meet an online friend. Didn't you know? Zhong Mengmeng's mother said angrily. With something this serious happening, why didn't you notify us? I looked completely innocent. Meng Meng is almost 30 years old. I never would have thought she'd go meet an online friend without telling you. Zhong Mengmeng's mother pulled out her phone and dialed more than 20 times in a row, but no one answered. Her mother grew increasingly furious and pointed her finger at me, shouting, "If anything happens to my daughter, I'll never forgive you." For several days in a row, Zhong Mengmeng's mother couldn't find any trace of her, and she even called the police. The police arrived quickly. I simply told them that Zhong Mengmeng had gone to meet an online friend and hadn't come back with me. I wasn't lying. The reason we were abducted by human traffickers was precisely because Zhong Mengmeng insisted on meeting an online friend. Zhong Mengmeng said, looking bashful, that her online friend had 8-pack abs and was the CEO of a publicly traded company, and that she wanted to meet him in person. I thought it sounded fishy, so I insisted on going with her to keep an eye on things. I never expected that the charming, 8-pack abs sporting, domineering CEO from the internet would actually be a scruffy human trafficker. He used his CEO persona to lure in an innocent young girl. In my past life, after I was abducted, Zhong Mengmeng pulled out a spare phone with chat logs from the trafficker, claiming it was my secret account, and used those messages to prove I'd chosen not to go home of my own free will. The chat logs were extremely explicit, and there were even some explicit photos. After seeing this, the police fully believed Zhong Mengmeng's story. Now, under my guidance, the police logged into Zhong Mengmeng's account and retrieved the chat logs. The explicit nature of the content left the police speechless. The most eye-catching item was a photo of Zhong Mengmeng wearing black stockings and lingerie, clearly revealing her private parts. The caption read, "I miss my boyfriend so much I'm counting to 456. Zhong Mengmeng's mother refused to accept this evidence, insisting that I had fabricated the chat logs. I enlarged and printed the intimate photos of Zhong Mengmeng from the chat logs. They were as big as movie posters. I pointed to Zhong Mengmeng's neck in the photo and said, "Auntie, take a good look. Zhong Mengmeng's neck is covered in wrinkles, and she has a tiny, inconspicuous mole on her collarbone. I don't have any of that." Zhong Mengmeng's mother was so furious she tried to snatch the poster from me. I grabbed the poster and ran, holding Zhong Mengmeng's private photo high in the air as I circled the bustling street several times. Zhong Mengmeng's mom chased after me, cursing loudly. "You heartless monster. Mengmeng trusted you as her best friend, and this is how you treat her. May God strike you down." I retorted without looking back. "You were the one who framed me first. I was just trying to clear my name. Can't I even speak up about the terrible things your daughter has done? Can someone who pushed me into the arms of a human trafficker, seduced my fiancé, and drove my parents to their deaths really be called a best friend? When it comes to screwing over Zhong Mengmeng, I don't feel the slightest bit guilty." Fuming inside, I ran even faster. Seeing her daughter being chased and beaten, my mother couldn't stand it and stepped in front of me. "You didn't raise your own daughter properly. Why are you blaming our Aaron?" Zhong Mengmeng was already beautiful and had a great figure, but I was kind enough to retouch the blemishes on her face, making her look even more stunning. Sexy private photos, best friends turning on each other, a public showdown. Every element was incredibly eye-catching. The scene was absolutely breathtaking and thrilling. I don't know who quietly pulled out their phone and recorded it all. The giant poster I was holding became the focal point of the footage. The internet was flooded with news about Zhong Mengmeng. The people who had cyberbullied me in my past life all came out in force. They started digging up personal information on Zhong Mengmeng. Even a photo of her secretly picking her nose back in middle school was unearthed. Unlike my past self. In my past life, aside from my fiancé, I hadn't dated anyone else. My private life was spotless. People couldn't find any explicit photos of me, so they had to resort to photoshopping. But with Zhong Mengmeng, the photos were already out there. In order to snag a rich guy, Zhong Mengmeng cast a wide net to catch as many fish as possible. She's been flirting with a whole bunch of guys. Explicit photos are flying all over the place, each one more shocking than the last. Her romantic prospects realized they were just fish in Zhong Mengmeng's pond and jumped ship one after another. Some even went so far as to go live on streaming platforms, publicly revealing the details of their relationships with Zhong Mengmeng, along with various chat logs. Zhong Mengmeng's parents suffered an even worse fate than my parents did in a past life. Not only were they doused with red paint and had explicit photos leaked, but people even threw old shoes and underwear at their front door. Zhong Mengmeng had truly become a hot topic. Her fiancé, Chilian, came to me, hesitating to speak. Ran, you and Mengmeng are best friends. How could you do this to her? If Chi Lian hadn't suddenly come to me, I would have almost forgotten there was such a person. What happened to me in my past life had nothing to do with him. He wasn't involved in the trafficking, nor did he make things difficult for my parents after what happened to me. But his infidelity was an undeniable fact. When I returned to Beijing, he and Zhong Mengmeng were already married with a child, and they seemed very much in love. I don't know when they got together, but judging by Chi Lian's attitude, I suspect they're already involved. I glared at Chi Lian. What did I do to her? Chi Lian stammered. You printed her photo and let the whole country see it. He stammered, unable to form a complete sentence for ages. I really have no idea what I ever saw in Chi Lian in a past life. Zhong Mengmeng went fishing for rich men, gave up her body and wasted her time, only to end up with a loser like this. I have no idea what Zhong Mengmeng is after. If she likes Chi Lian, she should just say so. I'd let her have him. Good men are hard to find, but losers are everywhere. I cut Chi Lian off. First of all, I printed the photos because her mom slandered me, claiming I was the person in the picture. Second, her parents aren't even coming to see me anymore. Who do you think you are? I shoved Chi Lian hard. Zhong Mengmeng's body is soft, isn't it? Must be comfortable to sleep with her. Aren't you afraid of catching something? A flicker of panic crossed Chi Lian's eyes. Zhong Mengmeng's reputation is worse than a rat's these days. How could he dare associate with her? Zhongran, you've changed. You used to be so gentle and generous, but now you're so suspicious. And to think you're Mengmeng's best friend. Hearing the sound of my argument with Chi Lian, many people quietly peeked out to watch the spectacle. Some even pulled out their phones to secretly snap photos of the two of us. Chi Lian had his back to them and didn't notice their movements, but I saw everything clearly. My eyes flashed slightly as I said sarcastically, "You're so affectionate, calling her Mengmeng all the time, yet you claim there's nothing between the two of you. Do you know what Zhong Mengmeng said when she went out with me this time?" I jabbed Chi Lian hard in the chest. "She was just bragging to me about her relationship with you." I slapped Chi Lian hard across the face. "You jerk, I'm breaking up with you." Chi Lian was stunned by my slap. I'm usually gentle and easy to push around. How come I seem like a completely different person now? I actually had no proof that Chi Lian had cheated on me. But just like in my past life when Zhong Mengmeng slandered me, I had no way to speak up and refute it. No matter what I said about Zhong Mengmeng, she could never suddenly appear to refute me. Chi Lian soon became as famous in Beijing as Zhong Mengmeng, making him a household name across the country. Not only did I lose my job, but I was also ridiculed by many people. In my past life, I returned as the wife of a wealthy family not because I was truly lucky enough to marry Qinsha, the kidnapped crown prince. It was because, in order to survive and avoid being beaten, I had to showcase my business acumen. Seeing my exceptional abilities, Qinsha took me along to do business all over the place. It was less about doing business with me and more about keeping an eye on me. I'd work myself to the bone hauling goods, while he sat there like a lord, smoking, without lifting a finger. Once, while delivering vegetables to a high-end hotel, I happened to come across an elderly man in tattered clothes who was having a heart attack. The street was crowded, yet not a single person was willing to lend a hand. Moved by compassion, I helped the old man. To repay me, the old man brought his family to my home to express their gratitude. It was then that I realized he was none other than Wang Defa, the richest man in Beijing. Seeing that I had some talent for business, old Wang took a liking to me. With Mr. Wang's help, I was finally able to leave Chinsha. When I returned home, however, all I saw was indelible red paint smeared across my front door and the strange stares of the neighbors. An aunt who had watched me grow up sighed as she delivered the news of my parents' death. A desire for revenge consumed my entire heart. Before, all I wanted was to go home. Now, all I wanted was revenge. Zhong Mengmeng and her parents, Qin Shi, those human traffickers, and everyone who cyberbullied me and drove me to the brink, I would take revenge on every single one of them. I returned to Qin Shi's side once more, frequently seeking business advice from Wang Defa, and desperately building new connections. Old Master Wang did indeed have a son, who had gone missing at a young age. He had searched for many years without success, and after learning of my experiences, he gradually came to treat me as his own daughter. Fearing that relatives from his collateral line might mistreat me after his death, or even murder me for his fortune. That is why old Wang used Qin Shi as a shield, adopting him as his long-lost biological son. In secret, however, old Wang had bequeathed his entire estate to me. I was his sole heir. I calculated the timeline. It wasn't yet time to reveal my true identity to old Master Wang. Based on my memories, I compiled a list of the money-making ventures that were all the rage at this point in my past life. At this point in my past life, the stock market, which had been sluggish, suddenly surged. In just a few short days, many people made a fortune. Relying on my memory, I invested all my money in the stock market. In just a few days, my savings had increased more than tenfold. Then I used that money to start a business. Drawing on my memories from my past life, I gradually tracked down my old contacts and reached out to them. I quickly became a renowned rising star in the business world. My name was known to nearly everyone in Jing City. As a rising business star, I was able to approach old Master Wang with ease. I knew old Master Wang's preferences, held him in genuine respect, and had been helping him search for his missing son all along. Mr. Wang gradually opened up to me, took me under his wing, introduced me to everyone he met, and helped create more opportunities for me. My business empire continued to expand. Now, Chilian and I are worlds apart. I am a rising star. He, on the other hand, is a miserable corporate drone whose reputation is in tatters. With no man holding me back, my financial fortunes are soaring. Men really do nothing but slow me down. My name is appearing on TV more and more often. It seems like I'm in almost every shot featuring Mr. Wang, and more people are getting to know me. Many inspirational stories about me have been circulating online. No matter how many versions of my inspirational story there are, every single one is sure to include sexy photos of Zhong Mengmeng. I saw Zhong Mengmeng again when I was delivering ginseng to old Wang. I had obtained a century-old ginseng root, which is said to strengthen the body and promote health. To my surprise, outside Mr. Wang's villa, I ran into Zhong Mengmeng and my husband from a past life, Qin Shi. Zhong Mengmeng's figure had deteriorated significantly. Her face was swollen, and her hands were covered in frostbite. When she saw me, she hurriedly stood up and grabbed my arm. Ran, you're just in time. Quick, tell these security guards that my husband is the biological son of Wang Defu, the richest man in the country. Hurry up and let us in. I couldn't help but look at Qin Shi. In my past life, I endured every hardship imaginable just to make money and find a way to escape. Many of those business ventures were exhausting and grueling. I was so busy making money all day that I had no time to take care of Qin Shi. Qin Shi was a lazy good-for-nothing who loved to eat but hated to work, and he'd always get himself filthy. In this life, however, Qin Shi was dressed neatly and cleanly. His hair was combed until it was soft and smooth, and a layer of baby fat had even appeared on his chin. It seems Zhong Meng Meng has been taking good care of him. Seeing that my gaze was fixed on Qinsha, Zhong Meng Meng quickly wrapped her arm around his, looking at me warily as if she were hugging a precious treasure. Ran, he's my husband. You absolutely mustn't have any designs on him. Zhong Mengmeng's words made me laugh in exasperation. Me, have a crush on Qinsha. A good-for-nothing like Qinsha. Just having him stand in front of me makes the air feel dirty. The menacing-looking security guard at the door saw me and hurriedly opened the door with a smile. President Zhong, you're here. I smiled and nodded, leading Zhong Mengmeng and Qinsha into Old Man Wang's home. Old Wang looked at the two of them, looking rather bewildered. I set down the ginseng and said calmly, "These two claim to be your long-lost sons. I'm not certain if their identities are genuine, but I didn't want to miss the chance, so I brought them in." Mr. Wang frowned as he looked at Qinsha. Qinsha's features bore no resemblance to his own, nor did they resemble his late wife. But out of longing for his son, he did not send them away. He decided to wait for the results of the paternity test before making a decision. He instructed the butler to clean the guest room and have the two settle in. As soon as Zhong Mengmeng entered the Wang residence, she arrogantly ordered the staff to massage her shoulders and legs and take her shopping at the major department stores. Old Wang wasn't short on money, and until he was certain of Qinsha's true identity, he told the butler to do his best to satisfy Zhong Mengmeng's demands. Zhong Mengmeng tilted her head back and said haughtily, Ran, why are you working so hard? Instead of going out into the public eye to do business and entertain old men, you'd be better off following my example and finding a promising young man to marry. She dismissed my success as a fluke and attributed my hard work to selling my looks. Old Man Wang couldn't help but frown from the sidelines. I laughed. I don't have your figure or your looks, and I certainly don't have your luck. Zhong Mengmeng has dated dozens, if not 100, men. Out of all those men, not a single one was any good. I suppose that's a different kind of good luck, isn't it? Old Wang couldn't help but interject from the sidelines. Ran isn't a servant of the Wang family, nor is she an employee of the Wang family. Dressed head to toe in designer labels, Zhong Mengmeng said in a sarcastic tone. So what? I want her to keep me company. She linked her arm through Qinsha's and kept winking at me. Serving me is so much better than serving those old men. If I'm in a good mood, I might even treat you to a couple of designer handbags. After all those hard years in the mountains, Zhong Mengmeng's brain still hadn't gotten any sharper. Didn't she realize that with my current status, all I had to do was open my mouth, or even give a single glance, and people would be lining up to hand me handbags? How could anyone be as stupid as she is? Heaven had given her such a golden opportunity, a second chance at life. Yet she isn't focused on making money. All she thinks about is finding a good man to marry. I couldn't help but laugh. Well, thanks a lot, Meng. Zhong Mengmeng affectionately linked her arm through mine and whispered coldly in my ear. I know everything you've done in the past. Now that my husband is the heir to the Beijing elite, and I'm the daughter-in-law of Beijing's richest man, I absolutely, positively won't let you off the hook. Hearing her words, my body trembled involuntarily. Thinking I was scared, she said triumphantly, If you know what's good for you, hand over every benefit you received from the old man, go live on stream, and kneel on the ground to apologize to me in front of the whole country. My body shook even more violently. Why didn't I realize in my past life that Zhong Mengmeng was such a clown? I laughed for a long time before straightening up. Zhong Mengmeng, are you sure the man standing next to you is the son of the richest man in the country? I looked at Zhong Mengmeng's slightly rounded belly and smiled at her. Be careful not to lose both the battle and the bride. Zhong Mengmeng didn't take my words to heart. She let go of my hand and threw herself into Qinsha's arms, cooing sweetly at him. Back in the remote mountain valley, Qinsha had thought Zhong Mengmeng was the most beautiful and sensual woman he'd ever seen. Zhong Mengmeng treated him wonderfully, and he wanted nothing more than to hold her in the palm of his hand. Now that he knew his true identity and had come across Zhong Mengmeng's past scandals online, he felt even more that Zhong Mengmeng wasn't good enough for him. He was now a high and mighty prince of the Beijing social scene. He could have any woman he wanted. How could he possibly settle for a woman like Zhong Mengmeng, a woman past her prime? Just thinking about how Zhong Mengmeng had been with so many men before meeting him. Even her abduction had been to meet an online acquaintance. He nonchalantly brushed Zhong Mengmeng's fingers aside, creating some distance between them. His gaze fell on me, lingering and lecherous. But he quickly looked away. I'm not particularly attractive, just average looking. In this upscale mall, any saleswoman at any counter is prettier and has a better figure than I do. Qinsha had spent his whole life in the village. He'd never seen so many beautiful women before, and his eyes were glued to them. Several times, he was practically unable to walk, drooling over the sales clerks. Zhong Mengmeng, standing beside him, was so annoyed she couldn't help but pinch his arm. I watched from the sidelines, not at all surprised by Qinsha's behavior. He was just the same in his previous life. Qinsha knew full well he wasn't old Wang's biological son, yet he still paraded around as the prince of Beijing's elite circles, living it up wherever he went. I have no feelings for Qinsha, so naturally I don't care how many women he has around him. But Zhong Mengmeng clearly wasn't as magnanimous as I was. Before we even left the mall, she had pinched Qinsha's arm until it was swollen. The test results came back quickly. The results from over a dozen laboratories were completely consistent. Old Wang placed the paternity test report in front of Zhong Mengmeng and Qinsha. He let out a long sigh. The results are in. Qinsha is not my son. Even though Qinsha didn't look like a good person, Old Wang still secretly hoped that the man before him would be his biological son. Unfortunately, the results disappointed him once again. Zhong Mengmeng stood there in a daze, then lunged toward the stack of paternity test results. It can't be. This can't be. She frantically flipped through the paternity test results, going through one after another. With tears in her eyes, she threw herself at me. It's you, isn't it? You're the one behind this, aren't you? You've been reborn too. You resent me for not saving you in our past life, which is why you're doing this to me. I already paid the price in our past life. Why are you doing this to me in this one? What exactly have I done to wrong you? I sighed and pulled her arm away. I know you can't accept this, but I really have nothing to do with this. Even if I had the greatest power in the world, there's no way I could have infiltrated over a dozen laboratories at the same time in such a short period. Old Master Wang was used to such farces. In the 20-odd years since his son's disappearance, many people had brought children to pass them off as his son. When their lies were exposed, every single one of them reacted with this kind of hysteria. He was tired of this charade. Enough. He tapped the ground heavily with his cane. Although Qinsha isn't my son, I'm grateful he came here. I won't hold you accountable for your expenses during your stay. Consider it a gift from me. Now, leave. Several bodyguards rushed out and dragged the two of them out. Zhong Mengmeng kept shouting, "It can't be. It can't be." She even crouched outside to block my car. She stood in front of my car like a madwoman, demanding an answer. Please, for the sake of our past friendship, tell me exactly how you managed to bring Qinsha back to the Wang family. She was convinced I was the one meddling behind the scenes. I just sighed and said sympathetically, I don't understand a word you're saying. There's no such thing as past lives or reincarnation in this world. The idea of rebirth is utter nonsense. You'd be better off getting your head checked. Zhong Mengmeng stood there, dumbfounded. If there's no such thing as past and present lives, then what was the point of everything she's been doing? No, Zhong Ran must simply have no memories of a past life, which is why he thinks the concept of past and present lives is a lie. If there really is no past life, then how did she know about Qinsha's existence? To prove that Qinsha was the son of the richest man, she had tried several times to sneak into old Wang's house to steal a hairstrand or a tissue from him. Every time, she was caught by the bodyguards. At first, old Wang was understanding. Later, old Wang got angry and called the police. Zhong Mengmeng's mother received the news and posted bail to get her out. Seeing that her daughter had gotten pregnant by a penniless young man and ended up in jail, Zhong Mengmeng's mother was so furious she couldn't help but berate her. I've provided for you all these years, and this is the kind of man you marry. If I'd known you were such a good-for-nothing, I should have strangled you when you were a baby." She didn't just scold Zhong Mengmeng, she lashed out at Qin Shi as well. Her insults were as vile as they could possibly be. Although Qin Shi was lazy and gluttonous, he shared a flaw common to many men: he valued his pride. Hearing Zhong Mengmeng's mother's tirade, his face darkened, and he pointed at Zhong Mengmeng, shouting back, "What's so great about a slut? You look down on me, but I look down on you even more." As he spoke, Qin Shi moved to rip the designer clothes off Zhong Mengmeng's body and snatch the designer handbag from her hand. When he and Zhong Mengmeng were out shopping together, he'd seen the prices of these clothes. A single item was worth half a lifetime's income for an ordinary person. With all that money, he could easily buy a wife who was more obedient and prettier than Zhong Mengmeng. Zhong Mengmeng fought back with all her might, but she and her mother were both women. Even together, they weren't as strong as Qin Shi alone. Not only did they fail to overpower Qin Shi, but he also robbed them of all their cash and valuables. Zhong Mengmeng was stripped down to her underwear. If it weren't for Qin Shi worrying that Zhong Mengmeng's worn underwear wouldn't sell, she likely wouldn't even have that left by now. Flashbulbs went off, and Zhong Mengmeng was once again thrust into the trending topics. Her mother stood up, cursing, intending to call the police, but Zhong Mengmeng stopped her. "No, we can't call the police. He's the only son of Beijing's richest man. It must be that Zhong Ran, holding a grudge, who rigged things. Otherwise, I'd be a wealthy lady by now." Glancing at the phones around her, she clenched her teeth. She decided to take a risk and go live. Before going live, she called me. "If you just tell me how to get Qin Shi back into the elite circle, I'll let you off. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless." "You're crazy," I cursed into the phone and hung up in a hurry. I glanced at the young, handsome police officer beside me and gave him a smile. "Officer Ju, based on what I know about Qin Shi, he'll definitely go find those human traffickers to make another deal." Juyi looked at Qin Shi's image on the monitor and nodded slightly. "Those human traffickers are incredibly cunning. They've foiled our stings several times, but with Mr. Zhong's help, I'm confident we'll be able to apprehend this criminal gang." While Zhong Mengmeng was lost in her daydreams of becoming a wealthy socialite, spending all those years meekly currying favor with men, I was running my business while researching facial recognition and tracking technology. Not only is it highly accurate, but it can also display the subject's identity information, predict their movements, track their past locations, and even reconstruct their appearance from childhood. With the support of my technology, the police's tracking capabilities have improved significantly. Following Qin Shi, we quickly located the human traffickers. But we didn't arrest them immediately. Instead, we marked them and followed their movements, gradually bringing many human traffickers to justice. Qin Shi was also arrested for robbery. With the arrest of a large number of traffickers, and using the information they provided about their operations, we rescued tens of thousands of missing people. Among them were the elderly and children. Some still had gratitude and hope for life in their eyes when they were rescued. Some had long since become numb, and some had even grown dependent on the buyers who had purchased them, unwilling to return home. The rescued victims wept uncontrollably, and their families, who were reluctant to take them home, wept just as bitterly. Hearing the weeping all around me, I couldn't help but feel a lump in my throat. In my previous life, I never got to see my parents even once before I died. Filled with hatred, I knelt before old Master Wang and took over his family business. I hired a cyber hacker to dig up everything Zhong Mengmeng had done, including how she betrayed me and how she framed me. Once netizens learned of Zhong Mengmeng's malicious intentions, they turned on her en masse, hurling insults at her. Zhong Mengmeng's son was cyberbullied so severely that he dropped out of school. He spent his days cursing his mother for her cruelty and even struck her. Qilian also lost his job and spent his days drinking at home. Zhong Mengmeng was frequently beaten by both father and son. Zhong Mengmeng's parents were also the subject of public scrutiny because of her, and they didn't even dare to leave the house. I then compiled a list of everyone who had cyberbullied my parents and posted their names across major online platforms. I exposed their online aliases and real personal information. I hired the best legal team to ensure they not only paid compensation but also lost their reputations, becoming murderers in the eyes of the public. After handling all that, I spent a fortune and spared no expense to track down the human traffickers who had harmed me. I posted the traffickers' information online, and many victims' families tracked them down and beat them to death. Because they had committed murder, they were arrested by the police. As for Chin Shi, I laced his food with poison and let him die a slow, agonizing death. In my past life, driven by a desire for revenge, I committed many reckless acts. When the truth about my murder of Chin Shi came to light, I was arrested by Ju Yi. Ju Yi felt great sympathy for me. He often visited me in prison and brought me daily necessities. From Ju Yi, I learned that because of my imprisonment, Old Wang's business had been left leaderless and was being gradually taken over by competitors. Not only were Old Wang's businesses seized by others, but his employees also lost their jobs one after another and could no longer repay their loans. Some, driven to despair, even took their own lives. It was only then that I felt remorse. I clearly had many ways to seek revenge, yet I chose the most extreme one. My own murderous deeds caused so many others to bear the bitter consequences. I'm truly glad to have been given a second chance at life. Not only have I been reunited with my parents, but I've also been able to atone for the sins I committed in my past life. The tracking system I developed not only significantly increased the case clearance rate but also helped locate many missing children. I donated the system to the government free of charge. I also established a foundation dedicated to helping victims of human trafficking. After enduring prolonged abuse, many of the trafficked victims have developed psychological issues. My foundation not only helps them treat their mental health issues, but also supports their reintegration into society and helps them learn new skills. Ju Yi often comes by to help me. He really admires that I'm able to do so much. I smiled at Ju Yi. Officer Ju, actually, I've been wanting to take you somewhere. Ju Yi trusted me implicitly. Without even asking where we were going, he simply followed behind me. I led Ju Yi to the front door of Old Man Wang's house and knocked. The moment Old Wang saw Ju Yi, he froze in his tracks. No paternity test was needed. He recognized the person standing before him as his son at a glance. Ju Yi looked so much like Old Wang. Perhaps because Ju Yi's mother was a beauty, Ju Yi was even more handsome than Old Wang. In my past life, the moment Ju Yi caught me, I recognized him. But by then, Old Wang had already passed away, and I had become a criminal. Reuniting with Ju Yi would only lead to him being discriminated against. While in prison, I contacted a lawyer to ensure that the entire estate would be left to Ju Yi. I felt ashamed. Old Wang had entrusted me with a business empire, yet all I could give Ju Yi was a dilapidated, crumbling enterprise. The lawyer warned me that Ju Yi was just an ordinary police officer who had never run a business before. If the company went bankrupt, he would be saddled with debts heavy enough to crush him. So I abandoned the idea of leaving my assets to Ju Yi and broke down in tears. Old Wang had done so much for me, yet I couldn't leave his son a single thing. Fortunately, I've been reborn, and there's still a chance to make amends. Now that Old Wang is in good health and the company is being run successfully, with me assisting him, Ju Yi will surely be able to take over the company smoothly. Surprisingly, Ju Yi didn't choose to return and take over the family business. Instead, he hired me as a professional manager to run the company on his behalf. He still wears the same police uniform and does the work that belongs to him. He hasn't let inheriting the family business go to his head. He remains a kind and upright person. Zhong Meng kept saying she wanted to take revenge on me, so Ju Yi was extremely worried. He drove me to and from work every day and even hired several bodyguards for me. We all assumed Zhong Mengmeng's revenge would involve suddenly jumping out to stab me or sending hitmen to kill me. We never imagined that her so-called revenge meant going live on a streaming platform to expose my past crimes. She shouted excitedly to the viewers in the live stream. My dear family, now you know how vicious she is. It wasn't enough that she harmed me in my past life. In this life, she's deliberately trying to ruin me so I can't become a wealthy wife. I watched as she shouted family while counting down 3, 2, 1 to go live. Ju Yi and I exchanged a glance, suddenly realizing that compared to Zhong Meng Meng, it was us, standing there on high alert, who looked like the fools. I silently clicked report. Given Zhong Meng Meng's notorious reputation, her account was permanently banned. Later, I heard that she spent her days rambling about past and present lives, claiming she was about to become a wealthy wife and clinging to her increasingly round belly. Her mother had her committed to a psychiatric hospital. I went to visit her once. Her hair was a mess, her eyes vacant, and she kept hugging a pillow and grinning foolishly. The doctor said that the moment her daughter was born, she insisted on holding her to introduce her to her grandfather, but she accidentally let go, and the baby was dropped to her death. Yet she stubbornly refused to accept it, clutching the pillow and calling out to her baby. When she saw me, she didn't recognize me at all. She mistook me for a nanny and kept rambling about how her husband was a prince of the Beijing elite, asking me to cook her king crab. When I left the psychiatric hospital, the sky seemed gloomy. If my past self hadn't been captured by Ju Yi, perhaps I, having avenged my great wrong, would have gone mad from losing my purpose. Zhong Meng Meng at least had family to visit her, while I would die all alone in the psychiatric hospital. Suddenly, a thick coat fell from above and was draped over me. I looked up to see Ju Yi's refined, handsome face. He spoke in a calm tone. Actually, I've been having a recurring dream lately. In it, you aren't the universally admired President Zhong, you're just a pitiful and despicable murderer. My heart felt as if it had been clenched tightly by something, and I looked at him in shock. Since Ju Yi knew about my past life, how did he view me now? Ju Yi smiled at me. You looked especially petite and pitiful in that baggy prison uniform. Even though I knew you were a prisoner, my eyes couldn't help but follow you, investigating your past, hating myself for not finding you sooner. In the sunlight, his hands in his pockets, he smiled lazily. So in this life, I found you early on. I happened to see you abandoning your companions to flee, and I witnessed you berating your fiancé and causing a scene at the police station. I suddenly felt a bit shy. So he had seen every single one of my outbursts. Do you think I looked ugly like that? He chuckled softly and shook his head. No, I just thought you looked so adorable when you were flailing about that I couldn't help but want to kiss you. I froze, cradled in his arms. In this life, I won't have to catch you with my own hands, nor will I have to spend the rest of my days watching over your grave. Ran, I love you. The two of us stood on the bustling street, weeping uncontrollably. It's so good to be reborn. It lets me make up for all my mistakes and live happily with the one I love. The first amazing story has come to an end. Don't go anywhere. Let's move on to the second story now. A few days before Grandma died, she called me to her bedside and told me that after she passed away, I would gain the ability to foresee the future. But I must never tell anyone, especially my mom, or else everyone in the village would die. In my past life, I didn't understand what Grandma meant. I thought it was just because she and my mom had always had a strained relationship. But after my mom repeatedly promised to keep it a secret, I secretly told her about my ability to foresee the future. As it turned out, my mother said she couldn't keep this secret on her own, so she enlisted the entire village to keep it together. Because of this, she kept me in the village forever, and I didn't even have the chance to go to school. I was locked in the house where my grandmother used to live, and from time to time, villagers would come by with meat and candy to ask me about their fortunes and the future. I finally understood why Grandma had told me never to tell anyone this secret, especially my mother. Because she would turn me into a tool for making money, to amass wealth for my brother's future marriage and children. And I, and indeed, the entire village, would lose our lives because of the woman my brother brought home. I silently vowed that in this life, I would never let anyone know my secret. As soon as Grandma left, just like in my past life, my mom couldn't wait to ask me, did Grandma say anything to you? Did she say who the next prophet would be? I shook my head and said Grandma hadn't mentioned anything. Perhaps the next prophet would be among the women who would come to the village in the future. This was quite normal. After all, my grandmother had been an outsider who married into the village, and the village's prophets had always been women who had married into the village. Sometimes one, sometimes two, or even more. My mom looked disappointed. She said, "If only I were the prophet, I could earn more money for the family and help my brother find a wife someday." I smiled at my mom and said, "I'll study hard, get a scholarship, make a lot of money in the future, and help my brother too." Besides, since all the prophets have been women who married into the village, and I'm a local girl, how could I possibly become a prophet? My mom believed me and told the other villagers that Grandma hadn't revealed who the next prophet would be. The village chief was the first to doubt it. He came to our house and asked in detail about Grandma's every move before she died. When he found out she'd seen me once a few days earlier, he started grilling me. I insisted that Grandma hadn't said anything. She'd just called me in to bring her some water. The village chief said, "A prophet is not allowed to leave the house. She'll be attacked by all the dogs in the village. Do you dare to leave the house?" Of course I would. I'd known all along that this was just an excuse they'd used in a past life to keep me trapped at home, and that bringing it up in this life was just a ploy to intimidate me. I stepped outside and cheerfully greeted the neighbor's dog, which wagged its tail at me just as it always had. The village chief shook his head and said to my mom, "It looks like my grandmother didn't designate me as the next prophet." That's right. A prophet can designate a successor, that is, pass on their abilities to the next person, but she will die within a week. So, no prophet would ever reveal this secret, and no one has ever passed on the gift of prophecy to another. A few days later, my brother returned from his travels, bringing with him a beautiful woman, Chumai. Just like in my past life, I saw Chumai's future. She was deeply sinful and would kill my brother, my mom, and even the entire village. In my past life, I told my mother what I had seen, but everyone accused me of lying to exploit my status as the prophet. They were certain I was simply afraid that Chumai would become the next prophet. This is because the prophet is always chosen from among brides brought in from outside the village. If a local woman were to become the prophet, she would lose her ability to foresee the future after marrying a man from the village. No matter how I explained it in my past life, no one listened to me. In fact, Chumai began exhibiting many of the prophet's traits. For instance, all the dogs in the village would growl at her, the roosters dared not crow, the hens dared not cluck, and even the village's dominant goose would flee at the sight of her. The villagers said these animals feared her power and that she would become the village's most formidable prophet. But I knew those animals actually despised her. They wanted nothing more than to kill her, yet were powerless to do so. When Chumai first arrived in the village, she claimed she was just a tourist looking to experience the rural scenery and local customs. Just like in her past life, the moment she arrived, she started asking about the prophet. In my past life, upon learning I was the village prophet, Chumai immediately proposed marrying my brother. Rumors also spread that once she was with my brother, my prophetic abilities would vanish. Subsequently, she used trickery to alter my prophecy, convincing everyone that I no longer possessed the ability to foresee the future. There were many things whose outcomes I clearly foresaw, but she always found a way to change them. In the end, I had no choice but to admit that my prophetic abilities were gradually fading. Everyone believed that Chumai was the next prophet and that her abilities surpassed mine. In this life, when she learned that my grandmother was the previous prophet and had already passed away, she volunteered to become my brother's wife. Just like in her previous life, she didn't ask for a dowry or formal betrothal rituals. She simply moved into our home, got pregnant first, and then we held the wedding banquet. This was a godsend, so naturally, my mother and brother were overjoyed. In my past life, I did everything in my power to stop her from entering our home, because I knew she had ulterior motives. But even my own family didn't believe me, let alone the villagers. So she entered our home without a hitch and became the prophet. In this life, not only did I not say a word to stop her, but I welcomed her arrival with open arms. Because I already knew that as long as I didn't defy her, she wouldn't harm me. As for my mom and brother, I could only hope they'd have better luck. Just like in my past life, Chumai was quite the drama queen, clinging to my brother day in and day out, yet there was still no sign of a baby. As time went on, my brother didn't mind, but my mother had her complaints. My mother began to speak in veiled insults every day, calling Chumai a hen that wouldn't lay eggs. From the very next day on, Chumai would slaughter a hen every day to make soup, then show my mother the hen's belly full of eggs, telling her, It's not that the hen won't lay eggs, it's that you lack the fortune and patience. It wasn't until all the hens in the house had been eaten that my mom stopped daring to mention hens that don't lay eggs. Chumai said that you get what you eat. Since we wanted her to have a baby, we should eat pregnant animals, and that way she'd get pregnant soon. I was terrified. She was even more ruthless than in my previous life. In my past life, she only suggested eating pregnant animals after she'd already become pregnant. In this life, provoked by my mom, she'd actually eaten all the hens and was now demanding other pregnant animals. When she eats fish, she insists on ones packed with roe, and she especially loves eating the roe itself. I'm genuinely worried she'll end up pregnant with a whole bellyful of fish eggs. Unfortunately, in this life, I can see her future. She will have only one child, and she will die at that child's hands. She loved eating snails and could tell the males from the females. She only ate the females and gave the males to the villagers. Everyone thought she was a prophet and adored her. The villagers also knew her rule: no matter what they came to ask about, fortune or misfortune, they had to bring live, fresh animals, especially pregnant ones. So, our home began to be constantly filled with pregnant rabbits, and chickens, ducks, and geese that were in the midst of laying eggs. Sometimes, my mom would feel sorry for them, thinking the rabbits were about to give birth, or that the chickens, ducks, and geese were in the middle of laying eggs, and suggest keeping them a little longer. But whichever animal she felt sorry for, Chumai would eat first. She had a perfect grasp of her mother's thoughts. Gradually, just like in her past life, my mother became Chumai's most devoted and loyal follower. One day, Chumai asked me, "Why haven't I seen your dad? Where did he go?" I shook my head and said I didn't know. Then I asked her, "Aren't you a prophet? How come you can't see where my dad went?" She said she could only see what would happen in the future, not what had already happened in the past. I knew she wasn't a real prophet, but a strange feeling welled up inside me. It seemed that ever since Grandma passed away, I could clearly see what was going to happen in the future, and after meeting Chumai, I could even see some things that had happened in the past, something that hadn't happened in my previous life. But I absolutely couldn't tell anyone, especially my mom. Because I'd already seen my mom's past, she wasn't my biological mother, and my brother wasn't my biological brother either. When my brother was 5, Grandma foresaw a terrible future, saying that one day he would bring about the destruction of the entire village for the sake of a woman. My father said he was willing to take on my brother's future sins. So Grandma told my dad to take some alcohol, burn down the fox den 20 miles away, and then head west, never to return. But when dawn broke, my father missed my mother and my brother, so he ran back. So Grandma came up with another solution: to go down the mountain and bring back a girl blessed with great fortune and a strong destiny to serve as a guardian. So, following Grandma's instructions, my father went beyond the mountains and brought me back. My mother once said, "Since I'm so blessed and have such a strong fate, why raise me as a daughter? Wouldn't it be better to raise me as a daughter-in-law?" Grandma said that by taking me away, she had already incurred a heavy karmic debt. If she were to force me into marriage or abuse me, the entire village would be wiped out. At first, my mother didn't believe her and abandoned me in the mountains. That very night, a pack of foxes stormed into the house and tore my father to pieces, leaving not a single bone behind. The next day, Grandma said that if I wasn't brought back, those foxes would know we'd burned their den to avert the village's doom, and they'd surely return to kill everyone. So my mother heeded my grandmother's words and brought me back from the mountains. From then on, she raised me as her own daughter, and no one dared to gossip about me in front of me. Because the survival of the entire village was at stake. To make amends, Grandma passed her ability to foresee the future onto me, hoping I wouldn't hold a grudge against my family. Unexpectedly, as soon as Grandma died, my mother learned I was a prophet. For the sake of money, she locked me away in a room. Later, after Chumai became pregnant, my mother listened to her and had my tongue cut out and my legs broken. So, when the disaster that would wipe out the village struck, I could only watch helplessly as everyone was poisoned and driven mad. Finally, I set a massive fire, and I was burned to death along with Chumai and the bastard child she had borne. Thinking of the pain of having my tongue cut out and my legs broken in my past life, as well as the agony of being reborn in the flames, I couldn't help but shudder. Chumai gripped my chin, her long nails digging into my flesh, and asked casually, "You really don't know where your father went?" I saw through Chumai's past and future. She was a fox, and she had come to seek revenge. Killing my father over a decade ago was not enough to sate the rage in her heart. Because her own parents were dead. I wanted to protect myself, and I wanted Chumai to meet a terrible end, so I told her that my father had died when I was very young. If she wanted to know how my father died, she could get pregnant first. As long as she got pregnant, the village would surely hold a grand wedding banquet. On their wedding night, my brother would surely reveal all the secrets to her. In our village, only women who have had a wedding banquet are entitled to know the village's secrets. Chumai listened to my words, looking deep in thought. A few months later, Chumai announced she was pregnant, her belly slightly rounded. My mother and my brother were overjoyed and began looking for someone to calculate an auspicious date. Soon, they settled on a date that was exactly the same as in my past life. In this life, I wasn't confined to the house. Every day, I walked dozens of miles along mountain paths to school, then walked dozens of miles back, and on weekends, I tended the cows at home. One day, I discovered that our family cow was pregnant. I whispered in her ear, "Take your calf away, or she'll eat you." Cows are highly sentient animals. I believe she understood my words and knew exactly who I was referring to. In my past life, Chumai had slaughtered 2 pregnant cows, several pregnant sows, and pregnant ewes just for her wedding banquet, causing all the sentient animals in the village to go mad. At Chumai's son's 100-day celebration, the pregnant animals took poison of their own accord ahead of time. The cattle and sheep trampled people, the cats and dogs went mad, and in the end, some villagers were poisoned, while others went mad. I survived because I didn't even have the chance to leave the house. When Chumai found out I wasn't from the village, she didn't kill me, she only killed my mother and my brother. But she had previously slandered me, causing me to lose the ability to speak and walk, so I hated her with a vengeance. So I poured alcohol in the room where she and that bastard were, knocked them unconscious, and then set it on fire. Amid the raging flames, I watched the fire spread until the entire village was consumed. Then, I was reborn on the very day my grandmother passed on her precognitive abilities to me. Moo! The cow in front of me suddenly let out a long sigh, knelt before me on both knees, and tears streamed from her eyes. To my surprise, I understood what she meant. She wanted me to take care of her calf. I saw its future. It didn't have much time left. As long as Chumai ate it, its calf would end up in Chumai's womb. So it was willing to die to give its calf a sliver of hope. It begged me to tell Chumai that it was pregnant, hoping that Chumai's wedding could be moved up so that she could consume the calf in its womb before it was too late. That day, I returned home with a heavy heart. I had already seen it. There was no way to save the cow. The only way to keep a sliver of hope alive was for Chumai to eat the calf. I secretly told Chumai that the family cow was pregnant. But the cow was so big, my mom would surely never bring herself to slaughter it for food. The next day, Chumai started arguing with my mom, insisting she wanted to eat the family cow. My mom said, "It's such a big cow, it would be a waste to kill it for food." Chumai clutched her belly and said, "The son in my womb craves calf meat. Doesn't my mother want her future grandson to be as strong as a calf?" My mom had no choice but to agree, and she moved up my brother's wedding date so they could slaughter the cow. Since their wedding was moved up, the villagers weren't sure which pigs, cows, or sheep were pregnant, so they just picked a few at random and started preparing for the wedding banquet. As for Chumai, she couldn't eat much herself. She repeatedly insisted that whatever was inside the family cow be saved for her. After she personally prepared it, she didn't insist on anything else. On the night the family cow was slaughtered, my mom brought everything from the cow's stomach back home and started cleaning it up in the yard. I fought back the nausea and helped my mother clean it. Seeing that large mass of the calf's fetus, undulating and moving in the amniotic fluid, I couldn't help but vomit. Chumai said she would handle it herself. She rinsed the surface of the entire fetus and carefully placed it in the pot, explaining that the amniotic fluid was the most nutritious part. Then she added the cow's heart to the pot to simmer together. After my mom cleaned up the rest, we shared it with the rest of the village. Just like in my past life, I didn't eat a single bite of the beef. After all, I'd raised that cow from a calf. How could I possibly bring myself to eat it? After the wedding, just like in my previous life, Chumai's hostility toward me had lessened significantly. She must have already realized I wasn't this family's biological daughter. She began speaking kindly of me in front of my brother and mother, saying, "You're so old now, and walking such a long mountain path to school every day, how dangerous is that? Wouldn't it be better if I just lived on campus? That way, I could come home once every month or two, it would be safer and help me with my studies. I know she just thinks I'm getting in her way at home." My brother immediately suggested that since I'm already 16, why bother with school anymore? We should just follow the village custom and find me a husband. Chumai said, "What if forcing me into marriage leads to bad consequences?" My mom, probably thinking back to how things were before Dad died, quickly said we couldn't force me into marriage. I knelt at their feet and said I could go to boarding school, and once I started earning money, I'd send it back to help take care of my little nephew. But my mom and brother were reluctant to give me money for school. I told them that village children receive subsidies and don't need money. My mom finally agreed. Before leaving home, I could already see my mother's future. She would end up just like my brother, completely enslaved by Chumai, because, like my brother, she lacked the willpower to resist. As for Chumai, because of the child in her womb, she would never be able to harm anyone again. After getting their permission, I left the village that very night. When I reached Fox Mountain, about 20 li outside the village, I couldn't resist. I set the den on fire. The greatest natural enemy of the prophet is the fox, so every time we passed Fox Mountain, we would have our followers pour wine into the fox dens and set them ablaze. Even though there hadn't been any foxes in the mountains for many years. This was the first time I'd done it myself. Amid the blazing flames, I actually heard the wails of foxes and saw Chumai, her teeth clenched and her eyes filled with sorrow. Panicked, I kept running until I reached the edge of the highway. Only then, looking at the houses lining the road and the sparse pedestrians, did I breathe a sigh of relief. A large rock by the roadside caught my attention. It was a massive natural boulder, large enough for several people to sit on. Every time I passed it, I felt a sense of familiarity, as if I knew it well, even though it was just a rock. Usually, whenever I passed by, there were people taking photos on it, but it was still early today, and there wasn't a soul in sight. Having just run all night, I was both sleepy and hungry, so I simply lay down on it. I soon fell into a deep sleep and had a strange dream. In the dream, a careless couple passed by and placed their daughter on the rock to take a photo, but forgot her when they left. When they finally remembered and came back, they found the child was no longer on the rock, and no one knew where she had gone. "Wake up, son." A man gently shook me. I opened my eyes groggily, but I couldn't make out the person in front of me. A large, cool hand rested on my forehead. It felt so good, so refreshing. "The child has a fever. She must have slept on the stone all night trying to cool off. We need to get her to the hospital right away." A deep male voice sounded in my ear. In a daze, I was picked up and taken to the hospital. When I woke up, it was already evening. A man was holding my hand, speaking to me with warmth and excitement. "My daughter." For the first time, I felt fear and dread, because this man was shrouded in mystery. I couldn't see his future. It was the first time I'd ever seen someone like him. I pulled my hand away, curled up on the bed, and whispered, "Don't touch me." I was afraid of strangers' touch. I would involuntarily see their future. But I was also afraid of this man's touch, because not being able to see his future left me at a loss. He said helplessly that I was his long-lost daughter, named Yu Wenyaro. My head felt like it was about to explode with pain. The name Yu Wenyaro seemed etched into my mind, while the name I went by in the village, Urya, was hardly a name at all. The doctor standing nearby pulled out a piece of paper and said, "The test results are in. I am the missing Yu Wenyaro, this man's long-lost daughter." I saw the doctor's future. He was highly skilled and of excellent character, destined to become a renowned physician and take over this hospital.
so he hadn't lied.
So, is this man named Yu Hao my biological father? A prophet cannot see the future of himself, his loved ones, or a great demon. So is he either my biological father or a terrifying demon? I followed Yu Hao to the villa and met the rest of the family. A woman named Fang Jing who claimed to be my biological mother, my younger brother Yu Ziyi, and a younger sister named Yu Shui. I couldn't see what was happening between Yu Hao and Fang Jing, but I could see Yu Ziyi and Yu Shui's past and future. Yu Ziyi is indeed Fang Jing's biological son, while Yu Shui is the girl they found on that large rock. In the future, Yu Ziyi and Yu Shui will become a happy couple. It turned out that every so often, Fang Jing would go to the spot where the rock was and take in the girls who had spent the night there. Perhaps they firmly believed that this would help them find their own biological daughter. Even though Yu Hao and Fang Jing presented a DNA test report stating that I was their biological daughter, I could never bring myself to feel close to them. In fact, I even felt that they weren't as kind to me as my foster mother in the village. How could a birth mother be less caring than a foster mother? Besides, my foster mother wasn't all that great to me either, but I just had this gut feeling. On the first night I was brought back to the villa, Fang Jing said she'd finally found her daughter and wanted to sleep with me that night. Even though I objected, she still slept with me. As soon as we lay down that night, she asked me if, after all those years in the village, I had gained the ability to foresee the future and become a prophet. How did she know about the prophet? Thinking back to what Grandma had said before she died, I had a strange feeling. Was it possible that no mother, regardless of whether she was my biological mother, could know that I could foresee the future? I told her that Grandma was dead, and that the new prophet was my brother's wife, and that she was pregnant. Fang Jing sat up in bed, gritting her teeth, and cursed, "That damn old hag." I helped her sort out her mess, and she promised to pass the power on to you. Yet she played me. Just wait till I go and wipe out her whole village. There was nothing I could do. I couldn't see Fang Jing's past or future, so I could only guess that she must have made some kind of deal with Grandma, deliberately leaving me on that rock so someone would bring me to the village. No wonder I couldn't bring myself to feel any affection for them. They had deliberately abandoned me. They clearly knew I was in the village, yet they never once came looking for me, all for the sake of that so-called ability to foresee the future. Fang Jing left my room, she didn't sleep with me, and went to find Yu Hao. The room was well soundproofed, so I couldn't make out what they were saying. I guessed they were discussing how to deal with me. Perhaps they'd send me away tomorrow. The next day, Yu Hao told me he was sending me to a boarding school in the city. It seemed he still cared about that sliver of blood ties. Though he couldn't bring himself to like me, he was still willing to provide me with a basic education. Fang Jing said, "No matter what, my foster mother in the village raised me to adulthood. They'll cover my tuition and living expenses from now on, and I should still go back to visit my family whenever I have time. Of course I'll go back, I still need to see how things turn out for Chu Mai." Fang Jing said that based on my age, I should be in my first year of high school, but since the educational standards back then were limited, it would be better for me to repeat the 9th grade first, and then go on to high school. I insisted on starting in the first year of high school and felt confident I could pass the entrance exam. After all, just by looking at the questions and the people around me, I can predict the answers. What's there to be afraid of? There was still some time before school started, so Fang Jing enrolled me in a review class, the kind where I didn't have to go home every day. It seemed like her family didn't want to see me, but I couldn't figure out why. They were already so rich, so what did they need that precognitive ability for? Sure enough, after I foresaw the answers and the high school's admission cutoff score, I barely scraped by on the entrance exam and was admitted. Fang Jing handled my enrollment, ID card, and bank card for me. When the first monthly exam ended and we had a break, Fang Jing took me and Yu Shui to the village. She brought a huge pile of gifts, saying she wanted to thank my foster mother for raising and caring for me. When Chu Mai saw Fang Jing, she looked a bit dazed. In her past and future, I didn't see Fang Jing appear. But when she saw Yu Shui, fear flashed in her eyes. I saw Chu Mai and Yu Shui's past. They were actually mother and son, both foxes. Yu Shui had been placed on that rock by Chu Mai. To save her own life, she had no choice but to leave her child there. and her purpose in coming to the village was to seek revenge and obtain the prophet's powers to find Yu Shui. My mind was completely in disarray. What on earth had happened? Fang Jing didn't say a word to Chu Mai, but when she looked at Chu Mai's stomach, her expression was strange and grave. I don't know if she saw something, but in the end, she didn't say a word to Chu Mai. That evening, after dinner, she asked Chu Mai when she was due, then told her she'd come back after the baby was born. Then, she didn't stay overnight in the village. She left with me and Yu Shui. Chu Mai wanted to say a few more words to Yu Shui, but she seemed very afraid of Fang Jing, so in the end, she said nothing. After we returned, I realized that Yu Shui's future had changed. Before, she had a bright future ahead of her. She was going to be Yu Zed's wife. But after this incident, her future became unclear, and even Yu Zed's future became unclear. I didn't know if my ability to foresee the future was fading or if it had been disrupted. However, I acted completely normal, as if I hadn't seen anything. Back at school, I noticed that no one else's future had changed, and only then did I realize that my ability to foresee the future was still intact. Chu Mai's due date was drawing closer. On the day before her due date, Fang Jing arranged for Yu Shui and me to take the day off and took us to the village. Chu Mai's belly was huge. It looked as if she were carrying multiples. Fang Jing said that Chu Mai probably wouldn't be able to give birth, so it would be better to pass her precognitive ability on to either me or Yu Shui. A sense of foreboding washed over me. Chu Mai's gaze fell upon me, and in her eyes, I saw two possible futures. In one future, she said she would pass the precognitive ability to me, and then everyone in the village would die. The village would no longer have a reason to exist. In the other future, she said she would pass the ability to Yu Shui, and she would die, after which Yu Shui would marry Yu Zi. Everyone in the village would die as well, because there would be no reason for the village to exist. However, once it was discovered that Yu Shui lacked the ability to foresee the future, the villagers would be reborn and a new prophet would be selected. I finally understood how I had been reborn. It was Fang Jing. Just as Chu Mai was about to speak up and say to whom she would pass on her ability to foresee the future, she felt a violent kick from the baby inside her, and a piercing scream escaped her lips. Ah! The pain left her unable to speak the rest of her words. Her belly grew larger and larger, becoming increasingly transparent. Fang Jing told my foster mother that she could deliver the baby, then closed the door. She told Chu Mai to transfer her precognitive ability first, and then she would step in to save her. However, the fetus inside her seemed to sense the danger and struggled frantically. Finally, a finger emerged from Chu Mai's belly. In that instant, I saw his past and his future. He was a demon, a bull demon, transferred from a cow's womb into that of a fox spirit. The moment he was born, he would become incredibly powerful. Soon, I could see nothing at all. A tiny hand, followed by an arm, emerged from Chu Mai's belly. Fang Jing realized what was happening and tried to intervene. But it was too late. I don't know where I found the courage, but I grasped that tiny hand, gave it a gentle tug, and pulled him out. "Mommy," he cried, throwing himself into my arms. I was stunned. How could he mistake me for his mother? Chu Mai let out a agonized scream, transformed into a fox, and collapsed on the ground, her belly split open, blood everywhere. My foster mother heard the commotion, pushed open the door, and saw me holding a 2- or 3-year-old boy in my arms. Chu Mai was gone, and there was only a dead fox on the floor. My foster mother was terrified. She screamed, "The fox has come to seek revenge," and ran outside. My brother walked in from outside holding a hen, smiling as he said, "Maya, I went a long way to buy you a hen that lays eggs." When he saw the fox on the ground, his reaction was the same as my foster mother's. He screamed, "The fox has come to seek revenge," and turned to run outside. Soon, villagers armed with hoes, sickles, and rakes gathered at our front door. Fang Jing picked up the dead fox from the ground, walked to the courtyard gate, and calmly told the villagers that the fox had previously disguised itself as a prophet to deceive people and had been killed by her. Surprisingly, not a single person asked where the child in Chu Mai's womb had gone. I stood far away at the doorway, looking toward the main gate. Chu Mai's child was hiding behind the door, clutching the hem of my shirt tightly. The villagers all breathed a sigh of relief, but instead of thanking Fang Jing, they asked her about her identity with suspicion. Upon learning that Fang Jing was my biological mother, they unanimously told her to leave, saying the village did not welcome her. Fang Jing didn't say much. She glanced at me and left with Yu Shui. She didn't ask me to leave with her, for there was a new look of fear in her eyes. She was afraid of the child Chum I had given birth to. My adoptive mother and brother went mad. I named Chumai's son Nyonyo. I took Nyonyo and left the village, for I had seen its future. No more prophets would appear here, nor would any demons emerge. It would simply become an ordinary village. I went to the side of the highway, but the giant boulder was gone. I went to Yu Hao and Fang Jing's house, but their entire family had moved away. But at least I knew who I was, Yu Wenyaro, and I had my own bank card and ID to prove it. I walked into a lottery shop, bought a single ticket, and walked out a millionaire. With that money, I bought a house, put both Nyonyo's name and mine on the register, sent him off to kindergarten, and went back to school myself. As for Yu Hao, I suppose the DNA test didn't lie, he must be my biological father. But Fang Jing, I could never tell whether she was a monster or my real mother, and I still can't. What I do know is this: they abandoned me all over again, and this time they'll never come looking. I'll never understand why they needed me to be the prophet in the first place, and honestly, I don't want to know. All that matters is that I have Nyonyo, and that's more than enough.